By the end of this video, you're going to know everything you need to know going into week 4. And there are so many good games to break down, so let's just go ahead and get it started off. First, let's look at the Cowboys versus the Giants. So obviously this Thursday night football game is an NFC East rivalry game, and I think it's going to be one of the best ones we see. Honestly, I do think that the Cowboys are going to start running more with Rico Dowdle than Ezekiel Elliott. I think that we're going to continue to see his role go up and Ezekiel Elliott's role go down at the same time. Looking at their passing game, I think that Dak Prescott's going to continue to throw the ball to CeeDee Lamb. I think we're going to continue to see Jalen Tolbert get more targets, and we're going to see Brandon Cooks continue to get out of this offense as his usage seems to be going down a little bit. Looking at the Giants last week, we saw them beat the Browns, and I think that Daniel Jones honestly did a pretty good job here. He had 236 passing yards with 2 touchdowns, and once again, we see Malik Neighbors get the majority of this offense, 78 yards, 8 receptions, 2 touchdowns on 12 targets. I think we're going to continue to see Devin Singletary run the ball, especially against this Dallas defense, who has proven to not be a good defensive team, rushing the ball at least. As far as this game goes, I honestly do think that the Cowboys are going to take this, but I do think that it's going to be a closer than what a lot of people are expecting due to Dallas's run game being so weak. Next up, let's look at another rivalry game with the Jags versus the Texans. So starting it off with the Jags, obviously they got blown out by Buffalo, 47-10. Not something you want to see as a fan. Buffalo just completely took control of this game from the tip. And, you know, honestly, Trevor Lawrence just doesn't really look that good. And we see him only have 178 passing yards on 31 attempts, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. Definitely not good at all for him. I mean, looking at ETN only having 11 carries, not surprising considering that they were down for the whole game, basically. And, I mean, going into this game against the Texans, I think that this is going to be a really big chance for the Jaguars to come back for sure, especially being 0-3 to start the year. I think if they want to make the playoffs, they definitely have to beat the Texans here. But, you know, let's look at the Texans side of things, right? You have CJ Stroud. You know, obviously they lost to the Vikings last game, and I think that this was mainly because the Vikings defense is so good. We saw them completely shut down CJ Stroud's connection to Nico Collins, and I think, you know, the run game wasn't there either, with Cam Akers being the RB1 and Joe Mixon being out, obviously. I think going into this game, honestly, if the Texans can just get their pass game going, and if Joe Mixon is playing, their run game's going to be going as well. I think that the Texans should easily take this game over the Jaguars, but I do think that this is definitely a good watch for people who want to see a rivalry game. Next up, we got the Saints and Falcons game here. So, obviously, the Saints did not look as good last game as they have in the season so far. They lost to the Philadelphia Eagles 15-12. We're obviously more accustomed to seeing their offense being a lot better than it was this past week. You know, we saw Derek Carr here. He only had 142 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. We saw Rashid Shaheed get no reception, someone who was the wide receiver 2 of this offense. Chris Olave did do really well. Kamara continued to dominate someone in fantasy, who I think honestly is going to be one of the top running backs by the end of the year. And, you know, looking at the Falcons side of things, I think that this is definitely a game that they have to take if they want to take over the NFC South. We look at, you know, Kirk Cousins' play. I think that it's going to continue to be, you know, better as the season progresses. I think that he's just getting more comfortable in this offense. Bijan Robinson looks amazing. Drake London looks like he's going to keep on getting more targets. So, honestly, for this Falcons team, I really think that, you know, for them, this game especially is definitely one to win. And if they can just shut down Derek Carr's passing, I think that they can easily win this game. Next up, let's look at the Rams versus the Bears game. So, obviously, with the Rams, you got no Puka Nacua, you got no Cooper Kupp. They basically have no receivers. I mean, it's going to be really tough for them to get their passing game going. You saw Kyren Williams go absolutely ballistic in the last game where he had 89 rushing yards. He also had 2 receptions for 27 yards out of the backfield with a touchdown. And, you know, this game was honestly crazy in general, the 49ers-Rams game. That was definitely one that I thought the 49ers were going to win. And even looking at ESPN's probability chart here, the San Francisco 49ers had a 77.5% chance with 55 seconds left in the fourth. And so for the, you know, the Rams to take this game, that really shows that they have heart and they really want to win, right? However, let's look at the Bears. So obviously Caleb Williams looked pretty good in this last game. He had over 360 passing yards. And, you know, we're continuing to see that rushing upside for DeAndre Swift go down. You know, I think this is going to be a continued trend as the season goes on. I could see Roschon Johnson potentially being the RB1 in this backfield, maybe even Khalil Herbert. We're just going to have to see. I think DJ Moore is going to be the alpha wide receiver for Caleb Williams. I don't think Keenan Allen is going to do too much. I could see Roma Dunze actually being a pretty solid wide receiver 2 option for Caleb. But going into this Rams-Bears game, I honestly do think that the Rams should take this game. Even though they're obviously banged up by injuries, I do think that they take this because I just don't really trust Caleb Williams yet. I think that he's going to have to continue to prove to me that he is a solid quarterback in this league until I can start betting on him. Looking at this next game, we got another really good one with the Vikings versus the Packers, right? Sam Darnold is absolutely going insane. The Vikings defense looks like one of the best in the league after shutting down the Texans. And, you know, Aaron Jones is looking like a stud. You know, age is not affecting him at all. Justin Jefferson is the alpha wide receiver 1 in this offense, which I love to see Sam Darnold targeting him. You know, we're looking at the Packers, right, if Jordan Love plays, then I think this game's going to be really, really close. But if Malik Willis plays, I think that it's going to be a 50-50 shot, right? Last game, we saw Malik Willis go off. He did really, really well. But the week before that, we also saw him, he was kind of like a game-managing quarterback, right? So we don't know if he's going to be able to continue that consistent play, especially against the Vikings defense. Looking at Josh Jacobs, though, I think that we're going to see him get more carries than last week. Obviously, he was a little bit questionable with Emmanuel Wilson getting so many carries, but I think that this was because of how many carries he had in the week before. Josh Jacobs had, I believe, over 30 carries, right? So obviously, you're going to have your guy not get as many carries as that to give him a little bit more rest so he's, not banged up. But I do think that, someone else to look out for if Jordan Love plays is Jaden Reed. I think that he's the wide receiver one in this offense. I think he's going to continue to get targeted. So definitely something to watch here. But if Jordan Love plays, I actually do think the Packers take this game over the Vikings. If he doesn't, I have the Vikings taking this game. So this is really just a game time decision for me, but I really do like the Packers odds of winning this game. Next up, let's look at the Steelers versus the Colts game. I mean, let's just look at the quarterback play, right? Justin Fields, we're going to continue to see him having this rushing upside, something that's pretty predicted considering his style of play. Looking at, George Pickens in this offense, I think he's going to continue to see all of the targets, really. I don't think that Justin Fields is really going to target anyone else, and I don't think anyone in fantasy on the Steelers is startable except for Pickens. Maybe potentially Najee Harris, as we saw him get a lot of this workload, especially with Jaylen Warren being questionable coming into this week, I believe. So definitely something to monitor with that Najee Harris, Jaylen Warren backfield. Looking at the Colts side of things, though, we saw Anthony Richardson is absolutely playing horrendous. He's not targeting his main receiver, Michael Pittman Jr., which is making me mad because I have him in fantasy football. But even looking past that, Anthony Richardson has 6 interceptions to 3 touchdowns. We talked about his accuracies last week. This is still something to be concerned this week, right? He's not throwing the ball accurately. He's not making good decisions. And whenever he is throwing the ball deep, he has a man there, so he's making the right read. He just can't connect sometimes, right? And I also looking at Jonathan Taylor, I think that he's continued to absolutely dominate, right? We saw in this last game he did really well. I think that, going against the Steelers defense might be a little tougher for him. But overall, looking at who's going to win this game, I think I'm going to have the Steelers, which is kind of crazy for me to say because they might be 4-0 starting this year, which is something that I did not predict, especially with Justin Fields at their quarterback position. Next up, let's look at the Broncos-Jets game, where I honestly do think that the Jets are going to take this one pretty easily. I don't think we have to do much breakdown here, other than I do want to look at Aaron Rodgers, right? He did really well last week. We saw the passing upside for him, which I think is going to continue to happen, and I think we're going to continue to see Garrett Wilson get more targets and more receptions out of this quarterback play from Aaron Rodgers. Garrett Wilson did lead the team in targets last week. He didn't have a lot of receptions or any bombs, but he did have a couple opportunities there. Looking at Breece Hall, I think he's going to continue to be a very good running back, especially in fantasy football. But I do have a little bit of concern with Braylon Allen, as we did see him get a lot of snaps and a lot of carries out of this offense, where he actually had more rushing yards than Breece Hall last game. Looking at the Broncos, though, I mean, Bo Nix, he has no passing touchdown to start his career. He actually is leading the team in rushing yards, which is pretty funny. We do see a lot of rushing upside from Bo Nix, which is something that I was not expecting at all. And, overall, you definitely, especially if you're looking at fantasy football, you can't start anyone in this Denver Broncos lineup right now. But I do have the Jets taking this one pretty easily. Something interesting I do actually want to speak on, other than the offensive side of things, is looking at Patrick Surtain's matchup with Garrett Wilson. I think that Garrett Wilson might struggle a little bit, especially considering last week we saw Mike Evans struggle against Patrick Surtain. And even if we look at the weeks before that, Surtain also limited DK Metcalf to a very low production number. I mean, this is definitely something to look at, this Garrett Wilson versus Patrick Surtain matchup. Next up, let's look at another game that I think is going to be really good with the Eagles versus the Buccaneers. So, obviously, Jalen Hurts is having a lot of turnovers this year. He had a lot of turnovers last year. He's definitely, still a good quarterback to start in fantasy just because of his rushing upside. Looking at Saquon Barkley, he's an absolute beast, and I think that he's just going to be the RB1 this year in fantasy football. That offensive line is so good, and he's just going to be so dominant, right? We look at their receivers. Obviously, if you have A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith both out this game, Dallas Goedert is going to completely eat up all those targets. I think Goedert is a must-start tight end, even if Devonta Smith is still playing, because he's still going to take targets from A.J. Brown's play, right? Looking at the Buccaneers side of stuff, we got Baker Mayfield. He's doing pretty well to start the year. 6 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, 213.2 yards per game. Definitely pretty solid. Bucky Irving actually has more rushing yards than Rachaad White, and I've been kind of preaching this for the whole year. I think that Bucky Irving is actually going to take over Rachaad White's role sooner rather than later. and I think that we're going to see Bucky Everett be the RB1 for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Looking at the receiving core, obviously Chris Godwin has a lot more yards than Mike Evans right now, but I do think that this is going to switch over to where Baker Mayfield's going to be targeting Mike Evans more. You know, we saw Mike Evans, like I just said, really struggled against Patrick Surtain in this last game, so definitely something to look forward to. And I honestly do think that this game's going to come down to the wire, but honestly I think I'm going to have the Eagles taking it, just because I think that Saquon Barkley is going to be super hard for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers rush defense to stop. I think that the Buccaneers are going to keep this game close, but I just think the Eagles are going to overpower them. All right, next let's look at another game that's going to be really good, the Bengals versus the Panthers, which is definitely a game where I'm like, whoa, this game's going to be good. Yes, Andy Dalton starting at quarterback. I think that he is, you know, a very good quarterback for this Panthers roster. We saw him last year in the game that he did start. He also had over 300 passing yards. He went absolutely insane. Last game, he had 319 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. Only quarterback right now this year to have over 300 passing yards and 3 or more touchdowns in a single game, which is absolutely crazy. You know, we saw Chuba Hubbard. He was absolutely dominant in his running game. Deontay Johnson was the main receiver for Andy Dalton. So, I mean, as long as Andy Dalton's starting at quarterback, I think that you can start Deontay Johnson in fantasy football. And, I mean, looking at the Bengals side of things, I think that this offense is going to continue to be super, super good, right? Joe Burrow, Zach Moss, Chase Brown, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, all these guys you can definitely start in your fantasy lineups, and I actually like starting them a lot, especially T. Higgins. I think that he's going to get more receptions as time goes on. Obviously, he did all right in his first game back, but I think, you know, overall, this game I think is going to be really good. I think that the Andy Dalton's going to probably feast on this Bengals defense, especially after how good they made Jaden Daniels look, who definitely is a pretty solid quarterback, but I don't think he's as good as the Bengals defense made him look to be. And honestly, I'm going to go with the underdogs here. I'm going to take the Panthers money line just because I think that Andy Dalton's going to go absolutely off. Also, Andy Dalton went to my high school that I'm at right now, so a little bit of favoritism there, but I do think Andy Dalton's going to go off nevertheless. Man, this game's going to be good too. The Commanders versus the Cardinals. I mean, Jaden Daniels went absolutely off like we just talked about in Monday Night Football's game. Daniels had over 250 passing yards, a lot of rushing yards as well, and, you know, he had touchdowns in both rushing and passing. So I think that Terry McLaurin is definitely a wide receiver to be looking to buy in fantasy football. I did have in my buy low video last week on a YouTube short, but, you know, looking at the running back as well, Brian Robinson Jr., he's going to take over, especially if Austin Eckler's hurt. I think that he's going to be a very good running back to start. Looking at the Cardinals side of things, though, Kyler Murray, 5 touchdowns to 1 interception, very good. We're seeing him target more Marvin Harrison Jr. as the season goes on. James Conner was definitely a little bit scary in this last game, but they didn't really run the ball much against the Lions due to it being so close, and they were down the whole game really, so they had to throw the ball to obviously come back. Looking at who I think is going to win this game, though, if Jaden Daniels can continue his play, I honestly could see the Commanders winning this game. And obviously, you know, Arizona's passing defense isn't as terrible as the Bengals, so I do think this is going to be a little bit more of a challenge for Jaden Daniels. But I think that the Cardinals are going to win this game overall, just because I think Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. are just going to absolutely take over this game. And I think it's going to be a close one, but I do have the Cardinals winning this game. Patriots versus Niners, I really don't think that there's much to talk about here. I have the Niners taking the game. I think Brock Purdy, Jordan Mason, Juwan Jennings, I think that these are the 3 guys in this offense. Once George Kittle, if he comes back this game, I think that he's also going to be targeted a lot from Brock Purdy. Looking at the Patriots, I really do feel bad for Jacoby Brissett. He was getting absolutely abused on Thursday Night Football. Ramondre Stevenson is definitely someone that's a little bit questionable right now just because of how bad this Patriots offense is. Other than that, I really do think that the Niners take this game with ease. So let's go ahead and let's get to the next game here with the Browns versus the Raiders. And you know what, to be honest with you, Deshaun Watson did not look horrible in this last game, right? We saw him, you know, he had a passing touchdown to start the game immediately to Amari Cooper. I mean, after that, you know, he did all right. He only had 196 passing yards with 2 touchdowns, but no turnovers, which is, you know, pretty good. They did lose to the Giants, though, which does suck a lot because the Giants are definitely one of those teams that you need to win if you want to make the playoffs. Looking at the Raiders side of things, though, Minshew looked pretty bad, honestly, in this last game. He wasn't really targeting Brock Bowers as much, which is something to be concerned about. But I do think that Bowers can continue to get targets. Devontae Adams as well. And, I mean, looking at the backfield for both the Browns and the Raiders, you really can't start anyone fantasy football-wise. You can't start Jerome Ford, Zamir White. No one really, because there's just so much questionable people in this backfield. We don't know how they're being split. Looking at who's going to win this game, though, I do think that the Raiders should win this game. I do actually like Devontae Adams a lot in his matchups. I think that Devontae Adams is going to absolutely feast as long as Minshew targets him. Same with Brock Bowers, and I think that this game is going to be pretty good. Overall, I don't see it being a blowout at all. Next up, let's look at the Chiefs versus the Chargers game. So I think, you know, something that's pretty sad to look at is Justin Herbert's out, but more sad is Joe Alt. My guy is hurt too, so he's probably not going to be playing. He has an MCL injury right now. Looking at the rushing, though, you have J.K. Dobbins. I think he's going to continue to take more and more of Gus Edwards' role as time goes on. I don't think anyone in this receiving room is startable, especially with Justin Herbert out. So instead, let's take the Chiefs side of things. You got Mahomes. He's going to continue to do really, really well. Rashee Rice looks like he's an undoubtable wide receiver 1 in fantasy football. Carson Steele is definitely used a lot in the Chiefs offense, so someone that you could probably start, honestly. But looking at this game overall, I do think that the Chiefs take this one pretty easily just because the offense for the Chargers kind of sucks this week with no Justin Herbert, and they really have no protection with Joe Alt being out. Alright, now this game is going to be spicy. The Bills versus the Ravens. I love this matchup so much, right? We're looking at the Bills. Josh Allen is going absolutely insane. 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think he only has 1 fumble in the year, so that's absolutely crazy. James Cook looks like a potential top 5 running back in fantasy football, probably just because of his receiving upside, and he's also rushing the ball pretty well. Looking at the receiving upside for the Bills, there's not really anyone that you can start in particular because there's no dominant wide receiver 1. Josh Allen's really just spreading the ball out, which is something that we see the Chiefs do a lot, and I think that that's why he's so successful, is because, you know, he's able to spread the ball out. He's not relying on one person. Looking at the Ravens side of things, Lamar Jackson is going to continue to go off, especially with his rushing upside. Derrick Henry is going to continue to go off. I was not expecting this, especially after that first game where Justice Hill stole a lot of the snaps from him. I did not expect Derrick Henry to drop over 30 points in fantasy football. Zay Flowers is someone who's definitely a little bit concerning, but I think that he's going to step it up as the season goes on. But overall, I think that this game is just going to be absolutely insane. And honestly, I do have the Bills winning this game just because I think that Josh Allen is someone not to be messed with. I think he's probably going to win MVP this year if he continues his play right now. And honestly, I think this Bills team is a team that is very hard to beat. Now, looking at this Titans-Miami Dolphins game on Monday Night Football as well, this is just a rough game, right? I mean, you have no Tua, obviously. The Titans offense looks like it sucks. You have Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears probably splitting this backfield again. But, I mean, looking overall at this game, I think Will Levis, this is definitely an opportunity for him to go off, especially on Monday Night Football. I think that we're probably going to see another meme from him. But looking at, you know, the implied team scores, Miami only projected to have 18.75 according to Yahoo Sports. Tennessee at 17.75. So no one's startable really for the Titans at all. Looking at the Dolphins, you can maybe start A-Chain just because he's going to continue to get the workload of this backfield. You could definitely start Tyreek Hill, but other than that, I would not start Jalen Waddle just because Skylar Thompson has shown that he's not a very good passer at all. Honestly, I would not be surprised if the Dolphins actually pick up a new quarterback. Looking at who's going to win this game, though, I actually do think that the Titans are going to win this game just because I think that Will Levis is going to eventually break out into a pretty solid quarterback, and I think that this game could be it considering it's Monday Night Football. But, I mean, I guess we're just going to have to see once the time comes. All right, and looking at the last game of the week, we have Seattle versus Detroit, another Monday Night Football game. The Seahawks are considered underdogs. They have plus 155 money line odds right now. But, you know, looking at the Seahawks and the Lions, obviously Geno Smith right now is looking pretty solid. 3 touchdowns with 3 interceptions. Definitely not what you want to see. But we're looking at their running back usage, right? Zach Charbonnet has been a pretty solid running back, but we're looking at Kenneth Walker, who's going to potentially be back this week. So definitely a big, you know, help for the Seattle Seahawks as the time goes on. Looking at the receiving core, I think we're going to continue to see DK Metcalf be a pretty solid receiver. We're continuing to see Jackson Smith and Jigma's career record snap count be broken, at least percentages-wise. He's like getting up in the 80-85% range now. I think that's going to continue until he gets to 90%. I think we're seeing Jackson take over Tyler Lockett's role as a wide receiver 2 going forward. Looking at the Lions, though, Jared Goff, you know, 3 touchdowns to 4 interceptions. Definitely not what you want out of your quarterback right now. I mean, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs definitely do look really good out of this backfield. And, you know, looking at his receivers, Jameson Williams, he looked okay. I mean, we're seeing Amon-Ra get a lot more of these targets, which is definitely expected. Sam Laporta still really isn't involved in this offense, so something to look at, really. But looking at this game overall, I definitely do have the Lions taking this game just because I think that their defense is going to be able to hold the Seahawks offense down pretty well. And I do think that, you know, Jared Goff and this Lions offense is definitely really explosive, and I think that that's why they take this game. Alright, y'all, that's the end of the video. I really do appreciate you guys for checking out. If you guys liked it, make sure you guys like the video, and make sure you guys subscribe to stay in the know about everything in the NFL and also the NBA whenever the season starts. We're coming up on it super soon, so I'm really excited to make videos about that. But other than that, make sure you guys check out my stream coming this Saturday. We're going to talk more football. And yeah, I really do appreciate you guys watching all the way. I'm also going to leave all my links in the description below. That has my Twitter, my blog that I don't really post on anymore, but I'm going to hopefully soon. And my TikTok. And yeah, everything you really need to know there is down in the description below. So thank you so much for watching this video, and yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.